Imagine for a moment a wide, flowing river, and as you find a comfortable stillness, you can allow each word I say to be like a soft stepping stone, leading you gently into tonight's story. My voice will begin to paint a picture on the surface of this river, a picture of a story that starts with the grand, the mighty, the profoundly smelly River Thames. We're going to a time when a city held its breath and its nose and accidentally changed the world. Before we drift too far, if you feel a connection to this place, you're welcome to leave a quiet like or subscribe. Think of it not as a task, but as leaving a soft footprint in the sand before you continue your journey inward. And if you feel so inclined, you can let me know in the comments what city you're listening from, and what time it is for you now. Now is the time. Let the world outside dim to a soft glow. Listen to the quiet hum of the night, and let's take our first gentle step into the dreamscape of our story. Let's place you right there. The year is, let's say, 1855, a few years before our main event. You are standing on London Bridge, leaning against the cool stone parapet. The air is damp, carrying the familiar London mix of coal, smoke, rain, and something else, something organic. Below you, the River Thames flows, not as a clear, sparkling ribbon of water, but as a murky brown and incredibly busy highway. From this vantage point, you can see the very heart of the British Empire. It's a breathtaking sight. To the west, the new Houses of Parliament are rising, their Gothic spires reaching for the grey sky like a stone prayer. All around you is the sound of progress, the clatter of horse-drawn carriages on the bridge, the shouts of sailors and dockworkers from the wharves, the distant, rhythmic clang of a shipyard hammer. The river itself is choked with vessels, a forest of masts, great sailing ships that have just returned from India or China, their hulls stained with the salt of 1,000 seas, now jostle for space with puffing, frantic little steam tugs. This river is the city's lifeblood, its main artery pumping commerce and power into the capital of the world. It's a river of dreams. But you're not just here for the view, are you? You're here for the smell. You take a breath, and it's there. Not overwhelming, not yet. It's just a constant, low, sour note in the symphony of the city, an aroma of decay, of damp earth, of things best left unmentioned. You see, this river of dreams is also the city's toilet. For centuries, this has been the arrangement. Everything, and I mean everything, ends up in the Thames. You glance over the edge and see a slick, rainbow-colored film on the water's surface near the bank. That's the runoff from a nearby gasworks. A little further down, the water turns a strange reddish-brown, probably from one of the hundreds of tanneries where animal hides are processed. And that's just the industrial stuff. Every butcher's shop, every slaughterhouse, every fish market has a drain or a ditch that leads inevitably to the river. It's the city's great, slow-moving, free-for-all public bin. Dead animals, spoiled food, refuse of every imaginable kind, it all gets a quiet burial at sea, right in the middle of the city. Historians still debate just how much Londoners at the time were bothered by all this. Before it reached its crisis point, was this foul background noise simply accepted as the price of progress, the natural smell of a bustling metropolis? Or was there a growing, unspoken dread about the state of their great river? For most, it seems it was simply a fact of life. You see a waterman, a kind of river taxi driver, sculling his small boat, his face set in a permanent grimace as he navigates the brown water. H.E.S. not thinking about pathogens, H.E.S. thinking about getting his passenger to the other side without getting splashed. The truth is, for all its majesty, the Thames is a ticking time bomb. It is saturated with the waste of over 2 million people, a city growing faster than anyone could have predicted. The river is so thick with pollution that it's barely moving, a great, sludgy serpent coiled in the heart of London. You can see bubbles rising to the surface here and there, releasing little puffs of foul-smelling gas that pop in the air. It's the river, digesting. For now, it's just a part of the city's character. A rather pungent one, yes, but a character nonetheless. A flaw in an otherwise magnificent diamond. You pull your collar up a little higher, a gesture that does absolutely nothing to stop the smell, and you turn to continue your walk across the bridge. No one standing here with you on this day, in 1855, knows that this sleeping giant of filth is about to be rudely awakened by two very different things, a wave of remarkable convenience, and a wave of unbearable heat. You leave the grand public spectacle of the bridge behind and step into the quieter, more refined world of a London townhouse. The heavy oak door closes behind you with a soft, satisfying click, shutting out the noise of the street. Inside, the air is still, smelling of beeswax and old paper. A revolution happening in the smallest room of the house. You are led to a small, unassuming door. This is the water closet, a relatively new and highly prized feature. Inside, it's not a grimy outhouse but a clean, even elegant space. And there it sits, the marvel of the age. A ceramic bowl perhaps decorated with a delicate pattern of bluebells or willows, encased in a polished mahogany frame. This is the flushing toilet. The porcelain toilet, the porcelain throne. For us, it is the most mundane of objects. For you, standing here in the 1852, it is a miracle of sanitary engineering. To understand why, you have to remember what it's replacing. Before this, every London home had a dark secret in its basement or backyard, the cesspit. Think of it as the house's stomach. A large brick-lined tank buried in the earth where all the household waste accumulated. It was a self-contained system which sounds good in theory, but in practice, it was a nightmare. They would fill up, leak into the cellars, and release fumes that could, on occasion, literally cause an explosion. They had to be emptied by teams of men known as night soil men, a job so foul it could only be done under the cover of darkness. So this flushing toilet is more than just a convenience, it's a declaration of victory over the filth of the past. With a simple pull of a chain, a rush of water cleans the bowl, and the problem vanishes. It's clean, it's private, it's modern. But here's the thing about problems, they rarely vanish. Sometimes, they just learn to travel. The fatal flaw in this domestic revolution was where the water went next. The City of London already had a sewer system of a sort. But these were ancient brick tunnels designed for one thing only, draining rainwater from the streets to prevent flooding. They were never, ever intended to carry the concentrated waste of 2 million people. Yet, as more and more of these wonderful new flushing toilets were installed, this is exactly what happened. The new toilets were connected to the old rainwater drains. It seemed like the logical thing to do. The cesspit is foul, the river is well, the river is well, the river is over there. Out of sight, out of mind. This is a point where historians still argue. Was this a case of catastrophic short-sightedness, a genuine failure to predict the consequences? Or was it a deliberate, if cynical, choice to solve the immediate problem of overflowing cesspitasse by simply shifting the burden onto the public waterway? It was probably a bit of both. Progress was happening so fast, the city was growing so uncontrollably, that solutions were often messy, patched-together affairs, and the public was clamoring for this new technology. During the Great Exhibition of 1851, the grand showcase of Victorian ingenuity, a man named George Jennings installed the first public flushing toilets. People were fascinated. They lined up and paid a penny just to experience them. It became one of the most popular attractions of the entire fair, a testament to how desperately people wanted a cleaner, more civilized way of life. They just didn't think about the end game. So as you stand there, admiring the bluebell pattern on the ceramic, you can almost hear it. Not just the gentle hiss of water in this one pipe, but a sound that is now being replicated in tens of thousands of homes across the city. It's the sound of a million tiny streams joining together, creating a new and terrible tributary. They are turning a river that was already a dumping ground into a purpose-built, high-velocity sewer. Every single flush is another nail in the coffin of the River Thames. The magic trick of making the waste disappear from the home was really just an illusion. The waste hadn't vanished. It was just being collected, concentrated, and aimed directly at the heart of the city. That polished mahogany toilet is a luxury, a symbol of a future that has not yet arrived for most. To truly understand the city's desperation, you have to leave that quiet, orderly house and step back into the reality for the vast majority of London's citizens. Let's go to a different kind of home. perhaps in a crowded, narrow street where the buildings lean towards each other as if sharing a secret. Here, there is no separate water closet. Here, the past is not just a memory, it's a presence, and it lies in the basement. You follow a narrow, creaking staircase down into the earth. The air grows cool and damp, and a distinct smell begins to rise, a thick, heavy, ammoniac smell that catches in the back of your throat. Down here in the cellar is where the family might store its coal, its preserved vegetables, and something else. In the corner, by the faint light of a single tallow candle, you can see it. It's not a tank. It's not a tank, it's just a section of the cellar, walled off with damp, crumbling bricks, London's buried secret. There is a constant, quiet drip, drip, drip of moisture seeping through the walls. This pit is the final destination for all the waste from the household above. And it is very, very full. You can see that the liquid filth has saturated the surrounding earth, and the brickwork is stained with dark, oozing patches. You might see the scuttling shadow of a rat, perfectly at home in this subterranean world. For the family living just a few feet above, this is a constant source of anxiety. It's a battle to keep the smell from permeating the entire house, to keep the damp from rotting the floorboards, to keep the foundations of their own home from being poisoned. And it's not just a matter of smell, these pits were genuinely dangerous. As the organic matter decomposed, it released a cocktail of gases, including methane. This was the weird and terrifying quirk of the cesspit system, they could explode. A stray spark, a carelessly lit candle, and the house could be rocked by a foul, subterranean blast, a literal eruption of its own history. Londoners lived, quite literally, on top of a time bomb of their own making. The only solution was to have it emptied, but this was a task so unspeakable that it could only be performed at night. The men who did this work were known as night soil men, or, in an older, more rustic turn of phrase, gong farmers. After midnight, their carts would rumble through the sleeping streets. They worked in small, efficient teams, using buckets and shovels in the dark, a grim and silent ballet of removal. They were the city's secret plumbers, its invisible sanitation department. And here's something historians and sociologists still puzzle over: the strange social position of these men. On one hand, they were social pariahs. Their work was the definition of unclean, and the stench clung to them, making them outcasts during the day. Yet, they were also essential. A city without them would have drowned in its own filth within months. Because of this, they could command surprisingly high wages for their labor. They were simultaneously reviled and desperately needed, existing in a strange social limbo. They were the guardians of a secret that everyone knew but no one wanted to acknowledge. You watch them work in the flickering lantern light, their faces grim with concentration. This foul, back-breaking labor is what the flushing toilet promised to eliminate forever. It's no wonder Londoners embraced the new technology with such enthusiasm. They weren't just installing a convenient new appliance, they were banishing a monster from their basements. They were sealing a door to a dark, foul-smelling world. But with every cesspit that was sealed and abandoned, a new pipe was being laid to the river, carrying its contents away. They weren't raiding a private, household-sized monster for a single, city-sized one. And they were about to discover that the smell from this new monster would be far, far worse. It wasn't just the smell they feared either. They feared what the smell carried on its invisible wings. That fear you feel creeping out from the sealed-off cesspit in the midnight work of the gong farmers is not just a vague sense of disgust. It has a name. It's a chillingly simple idea that has gripped the minds of the most brilliant doctors and the most humble street sweepers alike. The idea is called miasma. It's the belief that disease, especially the terrifying and swift killer that is cholera, is carried on the air. It's not something you drink. It's something you drink. It's something you drink. You can almost feel the logic of it settling into your own mind as you walk the London streets. It makes a dreadful kind of sense. You see a pile of rotting vegetables in a gutter, and the smell is foul. You see the slums where people are packed together in squalor, and the air is heavy and stagnant. And it is in these places that the fevers and the plagues always seem to strike hardest. Therefore, the conclusion is obvious. The smell itself, The bad air is the poison. Miasma is a ghost in the air, an invisible, malevolent fog that rises from any place of decay and decomposition. This belief changes your relationship with the world around you. Every scent becomes a potential threat. A window is not just for light and air, it's a gateway for poison, and you learn to close it tight at night, especially if your home faces a graveyard or a tannery. You might carry a handkerchief not as a fashion accessory, but as a filter. A lady might hold a small, perforated silver bowl called a pomander, filled with sweet-smelling herbs, to her nose as she walks through a poor neighborhood, creating a tiny, personal bubble of good air to protect her. The city's official response is based entirely on this theory. During an outbreak, you might see great bonfires lit at street corners, burning tar and sulfur to purify the air. It's a dramatic, almost medieval scene, a modern city of steam and iron, fighting a plague with fire and smoke, trying to battle one bad smell with another, more powerful one. It's a war against an invisible enemy. And the enemy they fear most is cholera. They call it the Blue Death. It is a disease of terrifying speed. A person can be healthy at breakfast and gone by supper time. It drains the life and water from a body with such shocking efficiency that the victim's skin takes on a grayish-blue pallor. And because it seems to strike hardest in the smelly street places, everyone knows it comes from the miasma. They believe the foul air from the slums seeps into the homes of the rich, a kind of atmospheric revenge of the poor upon the wealthy. Here's where it gets complicated, a point that medical historians still untangle. Is the miasma theory completely wrong? Yes, in its mechanism. It's not the smell that carries the disease. But is it completely useless? Not quite. The theory often led people to the right actions for the wrong reasons. Cleaning up a filthy, stinking slum to eliminate its bad air would often, purely by accident, also clean up the contaminated water. So the pile of waste that was the actual breeding ground for the germs. So the theory, a flawed and incorrect hypothesis, sometimes stumbled into creating a positive outcome. But now think about the River Thames. If all decay produces a deadly miasma, then the river is no longer just an ugly, smelly inconvenience. It is the single greatest source of miasma in the world. It is a vast open sewer, miles long, churning and fermenting under the sun. It is the mother of all miasmas, the very fountainhead of a poisonous cloud. And as you stand by its banks, watching those foul bubbles rise and pop, you can't help but think you are standing on the edge of a weapon. Foul breath held in the lungs of the city, just waiting for the right moment to be exhaled. And one man of science, a man famous throughout the land, is about to try and measure just how poisonous that breath has become. You find yourself on a small steam-powered boat, chugging its way up the river towards Hampton Court. It's July of 1855, 3 years before the crisis will peak. The boat is not for public transport, it's a private vessel carrying a man who is, to put it mildly, a scientific rock star. His name is Michael Faraday. This is a man whose discoveries in electromagnetism are literally powering this new industrial world. He is a national hero, a brilliant, self-taught genius who commands the respect of everyone from the Queen to the common factory worker. And today he is conducting a very simple, very low-tech experiment. You watch as he leans over the side of the boat. He's an older man now with a kind, intelligent face. He's not using any complex equipment. Instead, he takes out a simple piece of white paper, a calling card, and drops it into the river. It vanishes instantly, not just disappears beneath the surface, but becomes utterly invisible the moment it touches the thick, brown water. He keeps dropping cards into the river, over and over, all the way up the Thames. So saturated with filth, that a white object is swallowed by the darkness immediately. Faraday is not just a chemist, he is a man with a powerful conscience and a gift for communication. He knows what he's seeing is more than just an ugly river. It's a sign of a colossal failure, a catastrophe in slow motion. When he returns to his study, he doesn't write a dry scientific paper. He writes a letter to the Times, the most influential newspaper in the world. And he writes it with an urgency that borders on panic. You can almost feel him dipping his pen in the ink, the scratch of the nib on the paper as he tries to find the words to convey the horror of what he has seen. He describes the river as a fermenting sewer. He details his simple experiment with the calling cards. He talks about the mass of fermenting impurity and the foul gases bubbling up from the depths, which he says are so offensive that we were forced to run from them. He is using his considerable public platform to sound a warning bell, and HES ringing it as loudly as he can. His letter is a sensation. It's published under the blunt, shocking title, The State of the Thames. Coming from a man like Faraday, it carries immense weight. He ends his letter with a direct, desperate appeal to the authorities. If we neglect this subject, he writes, one of these days we may have it forced upon us with a loudness that will be remembered for a generation. It is a chillingly accurate prophecy. But here is where you witness the immense inertia of power. You follow the ripples of Faraday's letter as they reach the Houses of Parliament, the very building whose foundations are being lapped by the filth he describes. You might expect a flurry of activity, an immediate debate, a sense of emergency. Instead, you hear a collective, bureaucratic shrug. The politicians, the men in charge, are dismissive. The problem is too big, too expensive. One government official famously quipped in response that the river's foulness was a monstrous fiction and that the water was actually rather clean. They debate the issue, of course, but it gets bogged down in committees, in arguments over cost, in jurisdictional squabbles between dozens of different local authorities, each responsible for their own little stretch of the sewer system. Historians still debate the exact reasons for this inaction. Was it a simple lack of political will? Was it the sheer mind-boggling cost of any potential solution? Or was it a kind of institutional denial, an inability to believe that their great city, the capital of the world, was truly on the verge of poisoning itself? Whatever the reason, Faraday's warning, clear and eloquent as it was, is effectively ignored. The letter is read, discussed for a day or two, and then filed away. As you stand again by the riverbank, the water looks the same as it did before. The same brown sludge, the same lazy bubbles. But now, thanks to Faraday, you see it differently. You can know what he has revealed. You are no longer just looking at a dirty river. You are looking at a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled. And all that's needed now is the right trigger. All that's needed is a little bit of sunshine. You can feel it the moment you wake up. It's June 1858. The air in your small room is already warm and thick, with no hint of the usual morning coolness. You open a window, hoping for a breeze, but the air that drifts in is just as still and heavy as the air inside. This is not the familiar, damp warmth of a typical English summer. This is something different, something oppressive. A heatwave has descended upon London, and it has come to stay. You walk out onto the street, and the sun is already a white, blinding disk in a hazy, cloudless sky. The cobblestones seem to radiate heat, and the usual London smells of coal, smoke and horsemen are now sharper, more acrid, baked by the relentless sun. The city, a machine that never stops, tries to go about its business, but there's a new sluggishness to rhythm. Horses strain in their harnesses, their flanks dark with sweat, seeking the narrow strips of shadow cast by the tall buildings. Day after day, it's the same. No rain. Just a brassy, endless sun. London, a city built for drizzle and grey skies, is not equipped for this kind of weather. The parks turn from green to a dusty yellow. The clay soil beneath the city begins to shrink, causing cracks to appear in the walls of buildings. But the real transformation, the truly terrifying one, is happening down in the river. You make your way to the Thames, drawn by a morbid curiosity. The river level has dropped significantly. The water that remains is thick and slow, barely moving. It's no longer just brown. It has taken on a sinister, greenish-black hue. And the sun is acting upon it like a giant laboratory burner. The raw sewage, millions of gallons of it pumped into the river every day, is not being washed out to sea. It is sitting, and it is cooking. The heat is accelerating the process of decomposition at an incredible rate. All that organic matter is fermenting under the sun, releasing vast quantities of methane and hydrogen sulfide. You can see it happening. The surface of the river is no longer just bubbling gently, It's fizzing, like a monstrous, flat glass of some foul champagne. The river is alive with the work of anaerobic bacteria, and the smell they are producing is something new. It's a smell that has an almost physical presence. This is where the science gets a little gruesome. What you're witnessing is the perfect storm. The low water level means the concentration of waste is higher than ever before. The lack of rain means no fresh water is coming in to dilute it. And the heat is acting as a catalyst, a turbocharger for the bacteria that are breaking it to a giant. The river is literally into a giant, open-air digester. And there is a debate among environmental historians about this moment. Was the heatwave of 1858 a freak event, or once-in-a-century anomaly, or was it part of a wider climatic pattern? Some evidence suggests that the Little Ice Age was coming to an end, and summers were generally becoming warmer. Regardless of the cause, its effect was undeniable. This wasn't just a bad smell. It was a chemical event on a city-wide scale. You see people by the riverbank holding handkerchiefs to their faces, their eyes watering. The stench is no longer just a background note. It's the whole symphony. It's a complex, multi-layered assault on the senses. It has the soreness of sewage, yes, but also the rotten egg smell of sulfur, mixed with the sweet, cloying scent of decay. It's a smell that seems to coat the back of your throat. It's a smell that feels heavy, like it has weight, like you could cut a slice of it and serve it on a plate. The sun, once a life-giving star, has become London's chief tormentor. It beats down relentlessly, day after day, baking the great river of filth, unleashing a phantom that had, until now, been sleeping in the murky depths. Faraday's prophecy is coming true with a terrifying speed. The city is about to have the subject of its river forced upon it, with a loudness that will be remembered for a very, very long time. It begins as a rumor, a whisper on the hot, still air. People in the neighborhoods closest to the River Southwark, Lambeth, are the first to notice the change. The familiar, unpleasant smell of the Thames is sharpening, intensifying, taking on a new and malevolent character. It's no longer something you can simply get used to, it's an invader. You are in your home, perhaps a mile from the river, and at first, you don't notice it. You are safe, behind your closed windows, trying to keep the heat of the day at bay. But then, as evening falls and you dare to open a window to catch an non-existent breeze, it finds you. It finds you. It's a faint, sour tang at first, a smell you might mistake for a blocked train in your own street. But it doesn't fade. It grows stronger, hour by hour. It seeps through the cracks in the window frames, under the door. It's a presence in your home, an unwelcome guest that refuses to leave. By the next morning, there is no escaping it. The entire city is wrapped in a blanket of stench. This is the moment the great stink is truly born. It's not just a smell, it's an event, an atmospheric phenomenon. The newspapers, struggling to find a name for it, call it a pestilential vapor or a noxious effluvium. The people on the street just call it the stink. You have to understand, this is not a smell you can ignore. It's aggressive. It triggers a physical, gagging reflex. Your eyes water. Your eyes water. Your hair, your curtains. The whole city smells like an open grave, a sewer that has burst its banks and flooded every street and alleyway. And because of the Miasma theory, this is more than just unpleasant. It is terrifying. In the minds of the people, every breath of this foul air is a breath of pure cholera. The city is not just smelling death, it is inhaling it. Panic, a quiet and genteel Victorian panic, begins to set in. Those who can afford to flee. The roads leading out of London are suddenly busy with the carriages of the wealthy, their trunks packed, escaping to their country estates where the air is clean. For the millions who remain, there is no escape. Life must go on, but now it is lives through a filter. You see people walking the streets with handkerchiefs pressed to their faces, often doused in vinegar or perfume in a futile attempt to mask the stench. Apothecaries do a roaring trade in smelling salts and bottles of chloride of lime, a harsh, chlorine-based disinfectant. You might see a woman's wound in the street, overcome by the heat and the smell, and be revived by having a vial of smelling salts waved under her nose. It's a scene of mass public revulsion. Historians often debate the true intensity of the smell. How bad was it, really? We have only subjective, written accounts, often prone to dramatic exaggeration. But the consistency of these accounts is telling. Writers dip their pens in the most lurid ink to describe it. They compare it to the breath of a dragon, to the opening of a long-sealed tomb, to the smell of hell itself. One thing is clear. It was a smell so profound, so all-encompassing, that it fundamentally altered the experience of being in the city. One of the strangest pieces of evidence we have is what happened to the river's industry. The Thames had its own economy of scavengers. There were the mudlarkers, often children, who scavenged the riverbanks at low tide for anything of value, scraps of metal, coal, rope. There were the dredger men, who dredged the riverbed for treasure. And there were the toucheurs, who waded through the sewers themselves, a truly perilous occupation. Men and children accustomed to the city's worst filth were forced to abandon their work. The smell and the raw toxicity of the water was too much even for them. When the city's professional filth finders give up, you know you have a problem. The monster in the river has finally awakened, and its breath is rolling over London like a slow, invisible, and utterly disgusting tidal wave. Let's shrink the scale of our story for a moment. Forget the grand sweep of the city, the pronouncements in Parliament, the letters in the newspaper. Let's focus on you. It's a Tuesday in late June, and you just need to get through the day. The morning begins not with the smell of toast or coffee, but with the pervasive stink that has become the new normal. It's the first thing you notice upon waking, a sour taste already in your mouth. You get dressed, and your clothes, which have been hanging in the wardrobe all night, seem to have absorbed the smell. It feels like you're putting on a second skin of pure filth. You decide to walk to work, a journey of maybe 30 minutes. The moment you step outside, it hits you full force. The sun is already hot, and the air is thick enough to chew. Your immediate, instinctive reaction is to cover your nose and mouth with a handkerchief. You had the foresight to sprinkle a few drops of lavender water on it, and for the first few seconds it helps. You get a brief, sweet moment of floral relief, but then the powerful, complex stench of the city breaks through, and the lavender is just a sad, defeated little note in a symphony of foulness. The streets are a strange sight. Everyone is doing the same thing. A city of 2 million people, all walking around with their faces half covered, like a population of polite, well-dressed bandits. You make eye contact with a stranger, and there's a shared look of miserable solidarity. No words are needed. You both know. You have to pass a butcher's shop, and the smell of the raw meat, normally just a part of the streetscape, is now magnified by the heat and mixed with the river stink into something truly nauseating. You hurry past, taking shallow breaths. Further down the street, a brewery is venting steam, and the smell of hops and malt, usually aroma, is now a sickly sweet addition to the toxic cocktail. Every normal smell in the city has been corrupted, turned into another layer of the great stink. You arrive at your destination, perhaps an office where you work as a clerk. The moment the door closes, there's a tiny bit of relief. The air inside is still foul, but it's less concentrated. The windows have been sealed shut for weeks. Some of them have strips of cloth stuffed into the gaps. Your employer has placed sources of chloride of lime in every corner. The harsh chemical smell of chlorine is sharp and unpleasant, but it's a welcome alternative to the miasma outside, of a desperate attempt to fight back. Here's a small, strange detail of daily life during this time that often gets overlooked. Pharmacists sold all sorts of bizarre anti-miasma contraptions. You might see a fellow clerk wearing a miasma respirator, a strange leather and gauze mask with a chamber for a vinegar-soaked sponge. It looks ridiculous, like something from a plague doctor's nightmare, but no one laughs. In this atmosphere of fear, people were willing to try anything. The day drags on. The sealed room grows hotter and more stifling. Your head begins to ache from the heat, the lack of fresh air, and the constant, low-level stress of breathing poison. You look out the window at the hazy, sun-bleached sky. You see the heat shimmering above the rooftops, and you wonder if this is permanent. Is this just what London is now? A city stewing in its own juices. Historians sometimes debate whether the Great Stink was a continuous, unrelenting event or if it came in waves, depending on the wind and the tides. The evidence from personal diaries suggests it was the latter. There were moments of respite when a breeze from the north might clear the air for an hour or two. But then the wind would shift, and the foul tide would roll back in, sometimes seemingly worse than before. These moments of relief only made the return of the stench more unbearable. It was a form of psychological as well as physical torment. Finally, the workday is over. You step back out into the evening, into the thick, warm, stinking air, and begin the walk home. The city is preparing for another night of sealed windows and uneasy sleep, another night of breathing the ghost of its own river. You feel a morbid pull, a need to see the source of all this misery. So you walk towards the river, the smell growing exponentially stronger with every step, until it's an almost physical pressure against your face. You arrive at the Victoria Embankment, and you see it. The monster itself, the River Thames in the summer of 1858. The sight is as offensive as the smell. The water level is shockingly low, exposing vast banks of a black, greasy, viscous mud on either side. This is a solidified sludge of human history and waste, a century of filth baked by the sun into a dark, cracked crust. And from the cracks in this crust, you can see a faint, shimmering vapor rising, like the river itself is breathing out poison. The water that still flows in the central channel is not water at all. It's a thick, syrupy liquid, the consistency of pea soup. It moves with a dreadful slowness, barely inching its way towards the sea. Its color is an unnatural, opaque black-brown with swirling iridescent licks of industrial chemicals on its surface. And as you watch, a huge bubble, a foot wide, pushes its way up from the depths and bursts, with a soft, wet plop, releasing a concentrated, gag-inducing puff of methane and hydrogen sulfide directly into the air. The river is farting. There is no more elegant way to put it. This is the moment you truly grasp the scale of the problem. Faraday's letters, the newspaper articles, they were all understatements. This is not a river. It is an open sewer, a septic tank stretching for miles through the heart of the world's greatest city. And it is, for all intents and purposes, dead. For centuries, the Thames had been a source of life. It teemed with salmon, eels, and countless other fish. But now, it is biologically extinct. Nothing can live in this toxic brew. There are no fish, no birds diving for food, no reeds growing along the banks. Any fish that swim up from the cleaner waters of the estuary die almost instantly from asphyxiation, their gills clogged with the filth. The river is a sterile, anaerobic environment, home only to the bacteria that thrive without oxygen, the bacteria that are producing this monumental stench. Here's a fascinating, if grim, little fact. The river was so septic that it even affected the metalwork. The brass fittings on the ships moored in the river turned black. The chemicals in the water were so that they were eating away at the iron hulls of the boats. Some captains reported that the paint on their ships was literally being peeled off by the foul water. The river wasn't just dead, it was actively hostile to anything that touched it. And this is where a long-standing historical debate comes into play. What was the exact chemical composition of the river during the Great Stink? We can't know for sure, of course. But modern scientists have analyzed sediment cores from the riverbed dating back to that period, and their findings are astonishing. They found incredibly high concentrations of lead, mercury, arsenic, a staggering amount of organic matter from human waste. It was a chemical cocktail of almost unimaginable toxicity. It wasn't just the smell that was dangerous, the water itself was a corrosive poison. You stand there, a handkerchief clamped over your nose, mesmerized by the sheer, awful spectacle of it. You see a dark shape floating in the sluggish current, a dead dog, its body swollen and bloated. It drifts slowly by, a piece of flotsam in a river of death. This is the source. This is the great, bubbling, stinking heart of London's problem. And just a few hundred yards from where you stand, up on the hill, are the men whose inaction has allowed this to happen. The men in the Houses of Parliament, and the stink is now paying them a personal visit. You turn your back on the dead river and look up towards the magnificent, newly built Palace of Westminster. The Houses of Parliament. It's a symbol of power, of stability, of an empire upon which the sun never sets. But today that symbol is under siege, not by an invading army, but by an invisible, relentless, and profoundly democratic cloud of its own making. The Great Stink has arrived at the doorstep of the government. The location of the Parliament building, once a point of pride, right on the majestic River Thames, has suddenly become its greatest vulnerability. The building's architects had designed it with a state-of-the-art ventilation system for its time. Great shafts and towers were built to draw in fresh air from the outside, circulate it through the vast network of chambers and corridors, and then expel it. The only problem is, there is no fresh air. The system is now acting like a giant vacuum cleaner, sucking the foulest, most concentrated stench directly from the river's surface and pumping it into the very lungs of the British government. You can almost picture the scene inside. Imagine you are a member of Parliament and MP. You arrive for your day's work, ready to debate the pressing issues of the empire crisis in India, a trade dispute with China. But the moment you step into the grand, vaulted halls of Westminster, you can't focus on any of that. The smell is overwhelming. It's inescapable. It's in the ancient stonework, in the heavy velvet curtains, in the leather of the benches. The seat of power smells like a public latrine. The government, for the first time, is forced to confront the problem in a way it cannot ignore. It is no longer an abstract issue affecting the poor in some distant slum. It is a direct, physical assault on the legislators themselves. They try to work, but it's impossible. MPs are seen leaving the debating chambers, their faces pale, handkerchiefs pressed to their mouths. Speeches are interrupted by fits of coughing and gagging. The business of governing the most powerful nation on earth is grinding to a halt because the air is too foul to breathe. And here's where a delicious irony comes into play, one that historians and political commentators love to point out. For years, Parliament had been presented with reports, warnings, and pleas to do something about the state of the river. They had dismissed them, delayed, and debated them into oblivion, a process often referred to as the Great Parliamentary Stink. Now, a literal Great Stink was forcing their hand. The metaphor had become a reality, choking on its own inaction. This leads to a debate that still echoes in discussions of public health and governance. At what point does a problem become a crisis? When does a government finally act? The story of the Great Stink offers a cynical but perhaps realistic answer. A problem becomes a crisis when it starts to personally affect the people in power. As long as the Miasma and the cholera were confined to the slums of Lambeth or Southwark, it was a tragedy, a social issue to be managed by committees. But the moment the Miasma wafted into the House of Commons, it became a national emergency. You watch from a distance as a well-dressed man, clearly an MP, rushes out of the building and takes a few desperate gasps of the slightly less foul air on the street. He looks angry, disgusted, and, above all, impotent. The full might of the British Empire, its armies, its navies, its vast wealth, is utterly useless against this enemy. You cannot shoot a smell. You cannot shoot a smell. Your Cantonment is not just under siege, it is humiliated. It is about to do something it has resisted for decades, take drastic, decisive, and very, very expensive action. Let's push open the heavy, ornate doors of the House of Commons and step inside. The air in here is a barely breathable chemical soup. The government, in its infinite wisdom, has decided to fight the miasma with chemistry, and the results are pungent. You see parliamentary staff scurrying around with buckets and cloths. They are following the current best advice from the nation's scientists. The vast, heavy curtains that hang over the riverside windows are being soaked in a solution of chloride of lime. This is essentially a form of bleach. The idea is that the chemical will neutralize the foul air as it tries to seep in through the windows. The result is that the entire chamber now reeks of a combination of raw sewage and a swimming pool. It's a smell so acrid it makes your teeth ache. This was a real and quite desperate measure. They used enormous quantities of the stuff, carting it in by the barrel load. Some accounts even say they were considering dousing the forehair of the Thames itself with tons of lime at low tide, in a grand, futile gesture to disinfect the entire river. The cost of this chemical warfare was astronomical, running into thousands of pounds per week, a colossal sum at the time. You find a seat on one of the green leather benches and watch the proceedings. The scene is one of barely controlled chaos. The Speaker of the House, enthroned in his high chair, looks pale and unwell. The MPs are not their usual boisterous selves. They slump on the benches, fanning themselves with papers. Many have their faces buried in scented handkerchiefs. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, the man in charge of the nation's finances, a man named Benjamin Disraeli, is seen leaning back, his eyes closed, a look of profound misery on his face. He would later describe the river as a Stygian pool, reeking with ineffable and unbearable horror. He wasn't known for understatement. And here's a detail that captures the sheer absurdity of the situation. The politicians tried to use the law to solve the problem. Not by passing a new law to build sewers, not yet, but by trying to use existing legal documents to escape the smell. They went searching through the parliamentary archives and found that they had a legal right to have their windows open. There was a frantic, almost comical debate about whether to move the entire proceedings of Parliament to a different city, perhaps Oxford or Street Albans, just to escape the stench. Historians still debate the true level of panic versus political theatre during these days. Were the MPs genuinely fearing for their lives, convinced that every breath was bringing them closer as a political opportunity to force the government's hand on an issue they already cared about? The answer is likely a bit of both. The fear was very real, but so was the political calculation. In the middle of this chaos, they are still trying to conduct the business of the empire. An MP might stand up to give a speech about a military budget, but his voice is hoarse from the chemical fumes, and his argument is punctuated by another MP in the back row having a coughing fit. It is a farce. The mother of all parliaments, the model of deliberative democracy for the entire world, has been reduced to a room full of miserable men trying not to throw up. You watch as Disraeli, a man famous for his wit and command of the room, stands to speak. But even he seems defeated by the sheer atmospheric oppression. The government's authority is evaporating into the foul-smelling air. They can't legislate their way out of this. They can't ignore it. They can't disinfect it. Their only option is to either flee or to finally, after decades of delay, surrender to the inevitable and build their way out of the crisis. And the decision is being helped along by another powerful force. Just outside these hallowed, stinking walls, the press. You leave the chemical effigy of Parliament and step out into the slightly less terrible air of the street. Here a different kind of battle is being waged, a battle of ink and paper. The Great Stink is not just a crisis, it's a story, and for the city's booming, fiercely competitive newspapers and satirical magazines, it's the story of the year. You walk to a newsstand, the kind of small wooden kiosk you see on every busy corner. The headlines on the front pages of the papers are not subtle. The Times thunders with righteous indignation, reminding its readers of Faraday's ignored warnings. The Illustrated London News features dramatic, full-page engravings of the foul, bubbling river, with terrified citizens recoiling on the banks. The press is not just reporting the story, it is shaping it, turning a smelly inconvenience into a national humiliation and a moral failing of the government. But the real heart of the public conversation is happening in the pages of a magazine you might pick up for a penny. It's called Punch. This is the great satirical magazine of the era, famous for its sharp wit and, most importantly, its devastating political cartoons. And in the summer of 1858, Punch magazine has found its ultimate villain, the filthy River Thames, which it personifies as a terrifying monster called Father Thames. You can almost see the artist in his studio, a wry smile on his face as he dips his pen in India ink. He's not just drawing a picture, he's crafting a weapon. One of the most famous cartoons of the era, one that is reprinted and talked about everywhere. It depicts a skeletal figure, Death himself, rowing a boat on the sludge-like Thames, with the Houses of Parliament in the background. The Highway's victim is not a person, but the City of London itself. The message is brutally clear. The river is a thief, and it is stealing the life of the city. Another iconic cartoon from this time is titled Father Thames introducing his offspring to the fair city of London. In this one, Father Thames is depicted as a filthy, bearded tramp rising from the river. He is presenting his three sickly, monstrous-looking children, whose names are Diphtheria, and cholera to a terrified Britannia figure, the symbol of London. It's a brilliant piece of propaganda, perfectly capturing the miasma theory's fear that disease was literally the child of filth. This is a point where media historians get particularly interested. How much influence did these cartoons actually have? It's a question that's impossible to answer with certainty. Did a cartoon in Punch directly cause a politician to change their vote? Probably not. But what they did, with incredible effectiveness, was to create a powerful, simple, and shared visual language for the crisis. They took a complex problem of engineering, finance, and politics, and boiled it down to a simple, visceral image: a monster in the river, and a government of fools holding their noses. This public mockery was, in its own way, as powerful as the stink itself. The MPS couldn't escape it. They were being ridiculed in print every single day. Their inaction was no longer just a matter of bureaucratic delay, it was a joke. They were seen as weak, ineffective, and literally overpowered by a smell. For a government that prided itself on its strength and global reach, this was an intolerable humiliation. You watch as a group of men gathered around the newsstand look at one of the cartoons and laugh. It's a bitter, gallows humor kind of laugh. The press is giving voice to their misery, and in doing so it's ratcheting up the pressure on the men in the stinking building down the street. The cartoons are creating a political climate where inaction is no longer just irresponsible, it's politically suicidal. The government is being attacked on two fronts, from the air by the miasma, and from the page by the satirists. The siege is tightening, and a capitulation is becoming inevitable. Amidst all this political turmoil and public misery, life for the very highest echelons of society is meant to continue with a semblance of normality. And there is no one higher than the Queen herself. Queen Victoria, the woman for whom this entire era is named, is about to have her own very personal, very brief, and very smelly encounter with the Great Stink. Imagine the scene. It's a hot, sunny afternoon in July. The plan is for a pleasant royal excursion. Queen Victoria, along with her beloved husband Prince Albert and their children, are to take a leisurely cruise on the river. They will board a royal steamer at Westminster, right in the heart of the stench, and travel to see the progress on a grand new project that Albert is passionate about, the Chelsea Suspension Bridge. It's supposed to be a delightful family outing, a chance to inspect a marvel of modern engineering, a perfect Victorian blend of duty and pleasure. You are standing in the crowd that has gathered to see the royal family depart. There is a palpable sense of anticipation. The royal barge is magnificent, all polished brass and gleaming paintwork, with the royal standard fluttering from its mast. The Queen and her family emerge, dressed in their finest. Victoria, but one who radiates an unshakable sense of authority, gives a polite nod to the assembled officials. For a moment, it feels like a normal royal occasion. At the moment they step onto the gangplank, you can see it on their faces. They try to maintain their composure, of course. These are the Windsors, masters of the stiff upper lip, but their noses wrinkle. Their smiles become a little tighter, a little more forced. They are walking directly into the thickest, most potent part of the miasma cloud that hangs over the river. You see Prince Albert lean over and whisper something to the Queen. She gives a curt, sharp nod in response. They board the steamer. The ropes are cast off. The royal barge pulls away from the pier. The crowd gives a slightly subdued cheer. The boat makes its way into the middle of the river, into the main channel of the thick, black, bubbling filth. And then something remarkable happens. Or rather, something remarkably short. The cruise lasts for only a few minutes. The steamer chugs a few hundred yards upriver, gets about as far as Lambeth Palace, and then, abruptly, it turns around. It makes a wide, slow arc in the sludge and heads straight back to the pier it just left. The story, which quickly becomes a piece of London legend, is that the Queen herself was so utterly repulsed by the stench that she ordered the captain to turn back immediately. Whether she actually uttered the famous line, "We are not amused," is a matter of historical debate. She almost certainly didn't, as it's a phrase largely invented by later storytellers. But her actions spoke louder than any words. The smell was so vile, so unbearable that it had defeated the most powerful monarch in the world. It had ruined a royal day out. This small, almost comical incident is hugely significant. It's the ultimate confirmation of the crisis. If the stink is bad enough to turn the Queen's own stomach, then it is undeniably real. It's no longer just the complaints of the poor or the editorials in the newspapers. It is a royal-endorsed Grade A, triple-certified catastrophe. As the royal family disembarks, their faces are a mask of polite disgust. The planned outing is cancelled, the day is ruined, and the story spreads through the city like wildfire. It's repeated in pubs, in drawing rooms, in the halls of Parliament itself. The Queen, our Queen, was driven from her own river by the filth. This little anecdote adds a final, unbearable layer of pressure on the government. They have failed the city. They have failed the Parliament. And now, in a very public way, they have failed their monarch. The time for excuses is officially and smelly over. A solution is needed, and it is needed. And it is needed now. And thankfully, a man with a plan has been waiting patiently in the wings for years. In the midst of all this panic, disgust, and political theatre, our story now turns to a man who is the complete opposite of the chaos surrounding him. He is not a flamboyant politician or a crusading journalist. He is a civil engineer. And not just any engineer. His name is Joseph Bozaletich, and he is the quiet, methodical, and stubbornly persistent hero that London desperately needs. Let's create a picture of him in your mind. He is in his late 30s, a man of medium height with a prominent brow, a strong jaw, and a magnificent set of Victorian sideburns. He dresses impeccably in the dark, sober suits of his profession. But his most defining feature is his eyes. They are calm, intelligent, and focused. This is not a man who looks at an impossible problem, takes out a pencil and a piece of paper, and starts calculating. For years, while Parliament has been dithering, Bozaletich has been working. He is the chief engineer for the newly formed Metropolitan Board of Works, a clumsy, bureaucratic body that was given the monumental task of sorting out London's infrastructure. And for years he and his small team of draftsmen have been in a dusty office, surrounded by maps, charts, and technical drawings, working on a plan. A plan so ambitious, so audacious, that most people considered it a fantasy. You can imagine him there late at night, the office lit by the soft hiss of a gas lamp, HES pouring over a vast map of London. It's not a map of streets, but a map of streams and slopes. He is a master of topography, of the gentle, almost invisible gradients of the land. He understands that water, even water thick with filth, will always obey the law of gravity. And this simple, powerful fact is the key to his entire vision. His idea is not to clean the Thames. He knows that's impossible. His idea is to stop the sewage from ever reaching the Thames in the first place. He plans to build a whole new, secret river system underneath London. A network of enormous, underground tunnels, what he calls intercepting sewers that will run parallel to the Thames, one on the north side and one on the south. These great tunnels will act like an underground highway, catching the sewage from every existing local sewer before it can drain into the river. They will then carry this captured sewage, using a gentle, continuous downhill slope, far, far to the east, miles downstream from the city. There, it will be held in giant reservoirs and released into the river on the outgoing tide, to be washed harmlessly out to sea. It is a plan of breathtaking elegance and simplicity, but its scale is almost unimaginable. It would be the largest and most complex civil engineering project the world had ever seen. It would require tearing up hundreds of miles of London streets, tunneling under canals, railways, and buildings, and manufacturing millions upon millions of bricks. Historians who study Bozaletich often debate the nature of his genius. Was he a great innovator, a man who invented new techniques? Not really. The core technologies he used, brick tunnels, steam-powered pumps, were already well established. His true genius, it's argued, lay in his synthesis and his scale. He took existing ideas and applied them on a level that no one else had dared to contemplate. He was also a master of detail. He personally checked thousands of calculations, obsessed over the quality of the cement, and designed a system with so much foresight that it would continue to serve the city for more than a century. So while the politicians are dousing their curtains in bleach and the Queen is turning her barge around in disgust, Joseph Bozaletich is ready. He has the plans. He has the calculations. He has the solution. All he has been lacking is the political will and the money. But now, thanks to the unbearable pressure of the Great Stink, both of those things are about to be delivered to him on a scale that will change the face of London forever. You are back in the hot, stinking chamber of the House of Commons. It's mid-July, the absolute peak of both the heatwave and the smell. The mood in the room has shifted from misery to sheer, unadulterated panic. The usual sluggish pace of parliamentary procedure has been thrown out the window. There is a sense of raw, primal urgency. They need a solution, and they need it yesterday. Benjamin Disraeli, the Chancellor of the Exchequer and leader of the House, rises to his feet. He is a master of political theatre, and he knows this is a moment for decisive action. He introduces a new piece of legislation. Its official title is long and boring. Something like the Metropolis Local Management Amendment Act. But everyone in the room, and everyone in the room, and everyone in the city knows it by its unofficial name, the Great Stink Bill. The speed with which this bill moves through the system is, for Parliament, the equivalent of breaking the sound barrier. Normally, a bill of this magnitude, one that commits the government to a project of such enormous expense, would be debated for months, if not years. It would be picked apart in committees, amended, sent to the House of Lords, sent back, then argued over endlessly. You watch, astonished, as the bill is introduced, debated, and passed through all of its parliamentary stages in a record-breaking 18 days. It is a legislative blitzkrieg, powered by pure desperation. The usual arguments about cost are brushed aside. Disraeli, official Conservative, stands up and proposes that the government grant the Metropolitan Board of Works and, by extension, Joseph Bozalettage the power to borrow £3 million. That's a sum so vast it's hard to calculate precisely, but think of it as billions. It's a blank check. The debate, such as it is shortened to the point. One MP stands and declares, "We are in a state of emergency, and we must do whatever it takes to solve this problem." Another simply says that they have a choice between £3 million and a pestilence. There is no real opposition. The stink has done what years of rational argument could not. It has united a fractious parliament behind a single, enormous goal. And here is where a subtle but crucial debate among historians of politics and engineering exists. Did Parliament truly understand the genius and detail of Bozalettage's plan? Or were they just so desperate that they would have approved any plan that sounded plausible? Some argue that it was a moment of enlightened, science-led policy making. Others, more cynically, suggest that Parliament didn't really care about the specifics. They just wanted to be seen to be doing something, and Bozalettage's massive, expensive plan was the most impressively decisive-looking option on the table. They weren't just funding an engineering project. They were funding the restoration of their own authority and peace of mind. The bill gives Bozalettage all real powers. He is given the authority to build his sewers wherever he needs to compulsorily purchase land, to demolish buildings that are in his way. The usual red tape is simply sifted away. The law essentially says, here is the money, here is the power. Now, please, for the love of God, make the smell go away. You are there in the chamber for the final vote. It's a sweltering evening. The gas lamps hiss, adding to the heat. The air is thick with the smell of sewage and chloride of lime. The speaker calls for the vote. A chorus of ayes echoes through the room. There is barely a no to be heard. It's done. The bill is passed. £3 million have been committed. A quiet, methodical engineer has just been made one of the most powerful men in London. He now has the full backing of a terrified government and a desperate public. The age of excuses is over. The age of bricks and mortar is about to begin, with the government's panicked blessing. And the blessing and a blank check in his pocket. Joseph Bozalettage can finally unroll his maps and turn his grand vision into a reality. Let's step into his office, a space buzzing with a new and electric sense of purpose. The air still stinks of the river outside, but inside it smells of drawing ink, paper, and the clean, sharp scent of possibility. You are looking over his shoulder at the master plan, a vast and intricate map of London's hidden geography. It's a work of art, a spitfire of lines and numbers that represents the new underground world he is about to create. And the core of it, the genius of it, is the principle of interception. He explains it to you, not with grand gestures, but with the calm, precise movements of a surgeon. He points to the hundreds of existing local sewers, a chaotic tangle of tunnels built over centuries with no overall plan. They are a mess. They all drain downhill, following the natural slope of the land, and empty directly into the Thames at dozens of different points. They are the source of the problem. His plan is not to replace them, but to domesticate them. He shows you the three massive main lines he has designed for the north side of the river, which carries the majority of the city's waste. There is the high-level sewer, which will start in the hills of Hampstead and use pure gravity to flow eastward. There is the middle-level sewer, which will handle the central part of the city. And then there is the low-level sewer, the most difficult and ambitious of them all, which will run right along the riverbank, deep underground, catching the sewage from the lowest-lying areas. These three main arteries will all converge at a place called Abbey Mills, in the marshy lowlands east of the city. There, he explains, they will build a pumping station of unprecedented size and power to lift the sewage from the loan up to the level of the other two. From Abbey Mills, all the collected sewage will then travel in a single, colossal tunnel, the northern outfall sewer to a reservoir at a place called Beckton, even further east, where it can be released into the Thames on the ebb tide. He shows you a similar, though slightly smaller, two-level system for the south side of the river, terminating at a place called Crossness. The sheer scale of it is hard to comprehend. We are talking about 82 miles, or 132 kilometers of massive, mainline brick sewers. These are tunnels you could drive a horse and cart through, and connecting to them will be over 1,100 miles, or 1,800 kilometers of smaller, local street sewers. It is a project on a pharaonic scale, but it will be almost entirely invisible when it's finished. A hidden monument to sanitation. And here's where you see Buzz Jeff's famous foresight in action. A detail that historians of technology marvel at. When his assistants brought him the calculations for the required diameter of the main tunnels, he looked them over, picked up his pencil, and said simply, "Well, we're only going to do this once. We may as well double it." He ordered them to double the size of the tunnels. They thought they not just for the London of 1858, but for the London of 1958 and beyond. He anticipated the city's explosive growth, the rise of skyscrapers, the increased water usage of a future he would never see. It was this single, simple decision that ensured his system would continue to function for over 150 years. It's a point of debate. Was this a stroke of genius, or a cautious engineer just building in a massive safety margin? Either way, it saved London. You look at the map at this beautiful, logical, impossibly ambitious network. It's a rational solution to an irrational problem. A triumph of order over chaos. But a plan on paper is one thing. Building it, in the middle of the world's busiest city, is another thing entirely. Buzz now has to move from the quiet world of maps and calculations to the loud, dirty, and dangerous world of bricks, steam, and men. You leave the quiet certainty of Buzz office and descend into the chaos and the noise of the construction site. The Great Stink Bill has unleashed an army upon London. Not an army of diggers, bricklayers, and engineers. They are known as navvies, the tough, nomadic laborers who built the canals and railways of the Industrial Revolution. And now, they have come to build London's salvation. The city is transformed into a vast, sprawling building site. The air, already thick with the stink, is now also filled with the dust of excavation and the smoke from countless steam engines. The dominant sound is no longer the clatter of horses' hooves, but the rhythmic clang of sledgehammers on iron, the shouts of foremen, and the groaning of cranes. Let's put you right in the middle of it. You are standing at the edge of a vast trench, a great, raw wound cut through a London street. The trench is 30 feet deep and just as wide. Down at the bottom, dozens of men are working in a world of mud and sweat. They are digging with nothing more than shovels and pickaxes. Their bodies slick with a mixture of sweat and the damp, foul-smelling earth. It's back-breaking, relentless work. For every shovel fuel of clay they remove, another seems to seep in from the wet, unstable ground. The navvies themselves are a breed apart. They are famously hard-working and hard-living. They follow the work, living in temporary camps or crowded lodging houses. You see them at the end of the day, their faces caked with mud, heading to the local pub to spend their day's wages. They were the unsung, and often unseen, heroes of this story. They were paid relatively well for the time, but their work was incredibly dangerous. Cave-ins were a constant threat. The primitive steam-powered machinery could fail with explosive results, and they were often working in ground that was saturated with a century's worth of leaking cesspit filth, exposing them to all manner of diseases. Here's a small, fascinating detail about their work that highlights the ingenuity of the project. To hold back the unstable, waterlogged London clay, the navvies used a system of enormous timber braces to shore up the sides of the trenches. But they also employed another, more powerful tool, steam. You see dozens of small, huffing steam engines lining the edge of the trench, each one powering a pump. These pumps run 24 hours a day, sucking the groundwater out of the earth to keep the workings from flooding. The whole project is a constant, noisy battle against the water that is trying to reclaim the land. And in the middle of this muddied chaos, an act of creation is taking place. You watch a team of bricklayers, the aristocrats of the building trade. They work with a swift, practiced grace. A trowel of mortar, a brick laid, a tap with the handle to set it in place. They are lining the bottom of the trench, building the great, curved arch of the sewer tunnel. They are not just building a drain. They are building a cathedral of brick, a structure of immense strength and surprising beauty that will be sealed in darkness for centuries. Historians and archaeologists who assist them still argue about the precise number of men who worked and died on this project. Record-keeping was patchy at best, and the lives of common laborers were not considered important enough to document carefully. But the estimates are that tens of thousands of men were employed over the decade of construction, and that the death toll from accidents and disease was significant. Each foot of tunnel was paid for not just in money, but in human sweat and, all too often, in blood. You look down into the trench, at this scene of organized chaos. This is the reality of progress. It's not clean or quiet. It's loud, messy, and dangerous. It is the brute force of human labor, guided by the quiet genius of one man's vision, reshaping a city from the inside out, one shovel of mud, one carefully laid brick at a time. You climb out of the muddy trench and find yourself back on the streets of London. But this is not the city you knew. For the better part of a decade, London is a city at war with itself, a patient undergoing a massive, painful, and very public surgical procedure. The scale of the disruption is almost impossible to overstate. Imagine you are trying to make your way from one part of the city to another. Your usual route is gone. The street has been replaced by a giant, timber-lined trench, 50 feet wide and 100 feet deep. The noise is relentless, a 24-hour symphony of steam engines, pile drivers, and shouting men. The air is thick with a choking dust that coats everything in a fine grey powder. To get around these vast chasms, the public has to navigate a maze of temporary wooden bridges and walkways, often rickety and crowded. Carriages and omnibuses are rerouted on bewildering new paths, creating traffic jams of epic proportions. Entire neighborhoods are cut off from each other. A journey that once took 10 minutes might now take an hour. The city's circulation has been severed, and it is in a state of constant, frustrating gridlock. And the construction doesn't just block streets, it goes through things. Bosoletage's plans were elegant on paper, but in the real world, his straight lines often collided with the messy reality of a centuries-old city. You might see a sight that is both shocking and strangely impressive. The front of a row of houses has been completely removed, sliced away to make way for the trench, leaving the rooms inside exposed to the elements like a giant doll's house. Bosoletage's powers allowed him to do this, to purchase property and demolish it if it stood in the way of progress. The lives of thousands of people were uprooted, their homes and businesses turned to rubble in the name of a cleaner future. Here's a curious little side effect of all this excavation that the city hadn't anticipated. As the navvies dug deeper and deeper into the London soil, they were also digging deeper and deeper into London's history. The construction of the sewers became one of the greatest archaeological digs the city had ever known. The workers were constantly unearthing treasures. They found Roman mosaics, ancient coins, medieval pottery, caches of Elizabethan weapons, and, grimly, the skeletal remains from ancient plague pits. For a while, a thriving black market in these antiquities flourished among the navvies, who would sell their finds to eager collectors for a bit of extra beer money. But not everyone was happy. There is a debate among social historians about the public's true attitude towards the project. While most people were undoubtedly grateful that something was being done about the stink, the daily reality of the construction was a source of immense frustration. Businesses were ruined by the endless road closures. Homeowners complained about the noise, the dust and the cracking walls caused by the deep excavations. Basaletti was a hero in the abstract, but on a day-to-day level, his project was a colossal nuisance. He received countless letters of complaint, and the newspapers that had once praised him now ran articles grumbling about the endless disruption. You stand on one of the temporary wooden bridges, looking down at the controlled chaos. On one side, you see the old London, a maze of narrow, ancient streets. On the other, you see the future, a vast, rational, and brutally straight trench, waiting for its brick lining. The city is being remade, forged anew in a crucible of mud, noise, and inconvenience. It is a painful, messy, and deeply unpleasant process. But you know that when the trenches are filled in, when the roads are repaved, when the noise finally stops, London will be a different city. It will be a city with a secret. A city with a clean, modern, and completely invisible river of its own making, flowing silently and efficiently beneath the feet of its citizens. The journey of the sewage in Basaletti's system is not powered by gravity alone. In the low-lying areas, especially south of the river, the waste needs a little help. It needs to be given a lift. And this is where Basaletti and his team created some of the most stunning and strangely beautiful buildings in all of London. These are the pumping stations. Let's transport you to one of them. We'll go to the south side of the river to a place called Crossness. You are standing in the middle of what looks like a vast empty marshland, and rising out of the reeds and the mist is a building that simply does not belong here. It's not a grimy, functional, industrial shed. It is a cathedral. It's a magnificent, ornate palace of brick and iron, built in a flamboyant style that can only be described as Victorian Gothic industrial, intricate brickwork, and a tall, elegant campanile that looks more like it belongs in Florence than in the London marshes. You step inside, and your jaw drops. The interior is even more astonishing. It's a vast, light-filled hall, and in the center, instead of an altar, are four of the largest steam engines the world has ever seen. They are gargantuan machines, each with a flywheel over 27 feet in diameter, weighing more than 50 tons, but they are not just functional. They are decorated. The cast iron has been molded into ornate patterns of flowers and foliage. The columns are topped with elaborate Gothic capitals. The railings are intricate, swirling works of art. Everything is painted in rich, vibrant colors, deep greens, reds, and golds. It is a temple dedicated to the power of steam and the conquest of sewage. Why on earth would anyone build a sewage pumping station that looked like this? This is a question that fascinates architectural historians. The answer lies deep in the Victorian mindset. To them, engineering was not just functional, it was a moral and aesthetic crusade. They believed that great public works should be beautiful, that they should ennoble the society that created them. Basaletti and his contemporaries were building for eternity. They saw no contradiction in lavishing incredible artistry on a building whose sole purpose was to pump human waste. This building was a statement. It was a declaration of victory over the filth and chaos of the Great Stink. It was a monument to the city's salvation, and monuments, they believed, should be glorious. You stand on a high iron walkway and look down at one of the great engines, which has been polished to a mirror shine. Each engine has been given a noble name. Victoria, Albert Edward, Alexandra, Prince Consort. These are not just machines, they are iron giants, servants of the crown, working tirelessly to lift millions of gallons of London's effluent 30 to 40 feet, so that it can continue its journey to the sea. When they were all working at once, the noise in this hall would have been deafening, the floor trembling with the rhythmic, thumping power of the steam pistons. And there is a small, slightly quirky detail that shows the pride they took in their creation. During the grand opening ceremony for the Crossness pumping station in 1865, which was attended by the Prince of Wales, the engineers demonstrated the awesome power of the pumps. But they weren't pumping sewage that day, of course. For the royal visit, they had filled the great underground reservoir with clean water, to which they had added a generous dose of perfume. The great cathedrals of sewage pumped a fragrant, sweet-smelling liquid, a final, symbolic act of purification before the real work began. You look around this magnificent, improbable building, and you realize it is the physical embodiment of the Victorian soul, powerful, ambitious, deeply proud, a little bit ostentatious, and utterly convinced of its own righteousness. It is the most beautiful sewage works in the world. We must descend once more, back into the dark, subterranean world that Bosaletic has created. Let's shrink you down, small enough to stand inside one of the main intercepting sewers after it has been built. The navvies and the bricklayers are gone. The trench has been filled in above you. You are in a vast silent brick tunnel, deep beneath the city. The only light comes from the single lantern you are holding, its flickering flame casting long, dancing shadows. The air is cool and still, with a faint damp smell of mortar and earth. And the first thing you notice is the shape of the tunnel. It's not a circle. It is a perfect, elegant egg shape, lying on its side, with a narrower end at the bottom. This wasn't an aesthetic choice. This was a stroke of quiet, practical genius, and it's one of the secrets to the system's incredible longevity. Why an egg? Bosaletic was wrestling with the fundamental problem of sewer design. The flow of sewage through the city is not constant. It ebbs and flows throughout the day. In the middle of the night, when the city is sleeping, the flow is just a trickle. But in the morning, when thousands of people are all using their water closets at once, and then again in the evening, the flow becomes a torrent. A wide, circular pipe would be great for handling the torrent, but the trickle would spread out thinly across the wide bottom, lose its speed, and dump all its solid waste, leading to blockages. A narrow pipe would keep the trickle flowing fast, but would be overwhelmed by the torrent. The egg-shaped tunnel solves both problems at once. The narrow curve at the bottom concentrates the low, nighttime flow into a smaller channel. This keeps the water level deep enough and the speed fast enough to carry away the solid matter, effectively making the sewer self-cleaning. But the wide arch top provides a huge amount of extra capacity to handle the massive peak flows during the day without ever backing up. It's a design that is perfectly adapted to the daily rhythm of the city it serves. It's elegant, efficient, and it works. As you walk through the tunnel, your footsteps echoing in the immense silence, you can appreciate the quality of the workmanship. The brickwork is flawless, every line of mortar perfectly finished. These tunnels were built to last for centuries, a hidden legacy of Victorian pride and craftsmanship. The bricks themselves were made from a special kind of clay and fired at a higher temperature than normal, making them incredibly hardened, non-porous. And the mortar that together is equally special. Bosaletic insisted on using Portland cement, a new and expensive material at the time, which had the remarkable property of getting stronger when exposed to water. He was building a system that would, in a sense, heal itself. This is where a small but persistent myth comes into play, one that historians have had a hard time dispelling. The legend says that Bosaletic employed teams of sewer flushers, men whose job it was to periodically open great sluice gates, releasing a tidal wave of water to clean out the tunnels. While some limited flushing was used in the smaller street sewers, the main intercepting tunnels, thanks to their egg-shaped design, almost never needed it. The legend of the heroic flushers is a romantic fiction. The true genius was in a design that didn't need them. You hold your lantern up to the curved brick wall. It's just a sewer, a dark, functional tunnel designed to carry away the city's filth. But it's also more than that. It is the product of immense labor, brilliant design, and a stubborn refusal to compromise on quality. It is a symbol of a city deciding to save itself, to impose a rational, healthy order on the chaos but had nearly destroyed it. And soon, very soon, this silent, empty tunnel is going to be filled with the purpose for which it was created. The great, hidden river is about to be born. Years of relentless, noisy, disruptive work are finally drawing to a close. The trenches have been filled, the streets repaved. The army of navvies has largely moved on, seeking the next great project. London, on the surface, is beginning to look like its old self again, but underneath, the great, silent system is now in place. The interceptors are connected. The pumping stations are primed. The outfall reservoirs are ready. Let's place you at a crucial junction, deep underground. You are in a brick chamber where an old, local sewer, one that for centuries has discharged its foul contents directly into the Thames, now meets one of Bozilettige's massive new intercepting tunnels. For now, the flow is still directed towards the river through an old channel, controlled by a heavy iron sluice gate. On the other side of a new brick wall is the dark, empty expanse of the interceptor. You are with a small team of engineers. They carry heavy wrenches and lanterns. Their faces are grim with concentration. This is the moment of truth. Years of planning, mountains of money, rivers of sweat, it all comes down to this. Will it work? The foreman gives the signal. Two men put their heavy wrenches onto the large wheel that controls the old sluice gate to the river. With a great groaning screech of metal on metal, they begin to turn it. Slowly, painstakingly, they are closing off the path that has poisoned the Thames for centuries. The flow of sewage begins to back up behind the gate, a dark, churning pool in the lantern light. Then the foreman moves to another part of the chamber. There is a section of the new brickwork that is temporary, designed to be removed. With sledgehammers, the workers begin to knock it down. Brick by brick, the wall that separates the old sewer from the new interceptor is demolished. And then it happens. With a sudden, deep-throated whoosh, the captured sewage pours through the opening, a dark, gushing waterfall in the underground night. It has been diverted. This stream of filth is not heading for the Thames in the heart of London. It is heading east. This quiet, unseen act of diversion is being repeated at hundreds of points all across the city. It's a slow, methodical process, a gradual replumbing of an entire metropolis. There is no grand ceremony for this moment, no cheering crowds. It happens in the dark, in the quiet, witnessed only by a few working men. But it is one of the most significant moments in the city's history. The final push to the sea is now underway. You can almost feel it, a new pulse beating beneath the city's streets. A great, slow-moving river of waste, captured and controlled, is now flowing silently and inexorably eastward. It travels for miles through the great brick tunnels, carried by gravity, lifted by the mighty steam engines at Abbey Mills and Crossness, and then carried again, even further, until it reaches the vast, cathedral-like reservoirs at Beckton and Crossness. Here, it is held. You can imagine these reservoirs, great covered lakes, each holding millions of gallons of the city's collected sin. The engineers wait, watching the tide charts with the same care as a ship's captain. And only when the tide is on the turn, when the full power of the Thames estuary is flowing out towards the North Sea, do they open the great iron penstocks. And with a roar, the waste of London is finally released, miles downstream from the city, to be diluted, oxidized, and washed away by the immense, cleansing power of the sea. Historians still debate the environmental impact of this final release. Was it truly harmlessly washed out to sea? By modern standards, absolutely not. It created its own pollution problems further down the estuary. But for the City of London in the 1860s, it was a miracle. The problem had been pushed so far away, it had effectively vanished. The final link in Bozilettige's great chain was complete. Let's return to where our story began. You are standing once more on London Bridge. The year is now, let's say, 1870th. A little over a decade has passed since the Great Stink. The sun is shining, but this time it is not an enemy. It's just the sun. You lean on the stone parapet and you take a breath. A deep, long, deliberate breath. And you wait for the familiar sour tang, the rotten egg foulness, the heavy miasma of decay. And there is nothing. The air smells of coal smoke, yes, it smells of horses and damp stone. It smells like a 19th century city, but it does not smell of sewage. The great, oppressive, city-wide blanket of stink is gone. It has lifted, like a foul fog finally burned away by the morning sun. You look down at the River Thames. The change is not just in the air, it's in the water itself. The river is still brown and murky from the city's run-off and natural clay of its bed. It will never be a crystal-clear mountain stream, but bubbling syrup of 1858. It is recognizably a river again. It is moving with a purpose, its surface ruffled by the breeze, no longer coated in a greasy chemical slick. And then you see something that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. A man is fishing from the riverbank. He casts his line into the water, a simple, hopeful act that speaks volumes. And a little further down, you see a small boat, not with a grim-faced waterman, but with a couple, a man and a woman, simply enjoying a leisurely row on the water. It is no longer an object of terror and disgust. This is the great and almost immediate triumph of Bozzaletti's system. It worked. The effect was not gradual, it was dramatic. As the intercepting sewers came online, the river began to heal itself with surprising speed. With the daily deluge of raw sewage cut off at the source, the natural flushing action of the tides and the flow of fresh water from upstream began to scour the riverbed and oxygenate the water. Here was a small but wonderful piece of evidence for this recovery. In 1879, a report was made to Parliament about a strange and unexpected event. A porpoise had been spotted swimming in the Thames, right in the heart of London, near Blackfriars Bridge. This was a creature that hadn't been seen in the central part of the river for generations. The news was greeted with a kind of quiet delight. It was the ultimate proof that life was returning to the dead river, and the larger creatures that fed on them were following. But there is a subtle debate among historians about the completeness of this victory. Did the new sewer system make the Thames perfectly clean? Absolutely not. It still received a huge amount of pollution from street runoff, industrial waste that wasn't connected to the sewers, and the occasional overflow from the new system during heavy rains. The river would not be considered truly clean by our standards until much later in the 20th century. But the key point, the revolutionary change, was that it was no longer an open sewer. The single greatest source of its pollution had been eliminated. You watch as the sun glints on the moving water. The first clean breath that Londoners took was more than just a physical relief. It was a psychological one. It was the end of a long, collective nightmare. The fear of the miasma, the terror that every breath was a gamble, began to fade. The city had faced a crisis that had threatened its very existence, a problem of its own making, and it had solved it. It had solved it with engineering, with political will, and with an incredible amount of sheer hard work. The city had saved itself from drowning in its own filth, and the proof was in every clean, fresh, wonderful breath you could now take. The clean air and the cleaner river were the immediate, celebrated victories of the new sewer system. But an even greater triumph was unfolding, almost unnoticed statistics. Bozzaletti's sewers had a secret weapon. They were about to deliver a final, decisive blow to an old and terrifying enemy, cholera. Let's go back in time, just for a moment, to a few years before the Great Stink. The year is 1854. You are in the crowded, desperate London neighborhood of Soho. A terrible cholera outbreak has struck. People are dying with frightening speed, sometimes within hours of their first symptoms. The air is thick with the smoke of purifying bonfires and the smell of chloride of lime. Everyone is terrified. Everyone believes the plague is being carried on the miasma blowing through the streets. Everyone, that is, except for one man. His name is John Snow. He is a quiet, methodical physician, and he has a radical, deeply unpopular theory. He does not believe in miasma. He believes that cholera is not something you breathe, but something you drink. He believes it is a poison that is transmitted through contaminated water. To prove his theory, he does something revolutionary. He makes a map. You can picture him walking the streets of Soho, his face etched with concern, knocking on doors, carefully recording every death, house by house. He then marks each death as a small black dot on a street map of the neighborhood. As the dots accumulate, a terrifying pattern emerges. The deaths are not randomly distributed. They are clustered, thick and dense, around one particular public water pump on a street called Broad Street. He takes his map to the local authorities. He argues, he pleads. He points to the pattern. He shows them that the workers at a nearby brewery, who drank only beer and never took water from the pump, are almost entirely unaffected. Finally, worn down by his relentless logic, the skeptical parish officials agree to a simple experiment. They remove the handle from the Broad Street pump, making it impossible to draw water. It is a landmark moment in the history of public health, a brilliant piece of epidemiological detective work. Jon Snow has proven his theory. He has found the killer. But here is the tragedy: almost no one believes him. The medical establishment is so deeply wedded to the Miasma theory that they dismiss his findings. His work is largely ignored. The pump handle is eventually replaced, and his discovery fades into obscurity. A vindicated but largely unheralded prophet. Now, let's return to the 1872. Bozilettich's great sewer system is now fully operational. And something miraculous is happening. Cholera, which had struck London in terrifying epidemic waves for decades, simply vanishes. There is a small outbreak in the East End in 1866, in an area that had not yet been connected to the new system. But once the final connection is made, the disease is effectively banished from the city. It never returns in epidemic form. And this is the secret, unintended miracle of Bozilettich's work. Joseph Bozilettich, a firm believer in the miasma theory, had designed his entire system with the goal of eliminating the bad smells he thought were causing disease. But in doing so, he had, completely by accident, done something far more important. He had stopped the city's sewage from contaminating the city's drinking water. The new sewers intercepted the waste before it could leak from cesspits into the shallow wells, like the one on Broad Street. They stopped it from being drawn in a diluted but still deadly form from the filthy Thames by the private water companies. Historians still debate this point with some passion. Was it truly an accident? Or did Bozilettich and that water might be the culprit, even if they didn't have the proof? It's hard to say for sure, but the dominant narrative is one of a beautiful, historic irony, a man working diligently to solve the wrong problem, and in the process, accidentally stumbling upon the perfect solution to the right one. He built a monument to a flawed theory, and in doing so, saved countless thousands of lives and posthumously vindicated the forgotten drive. Jon Snow, the ghost of cholera, was gone, not because the air was cleaner, but because the water was. The years roll by. The memory of the great stink begins to fade from a traumatic, lived experience into a piece of London folklore, a story their grandparents tell their grandchildren. Joseph Bozilettich, once the savior of the city, becomes just another quiet, respectable Victorian gentleman. He is knighted by a grateful queen, but he never seeks the spotlight. He continues his work, quietly and deficiently, for another 30 years. But his greatest work is not yet finished. Magnificent gift to the city of London. You are standing again by the river, but the riverbank itself is different. Where there once were muddy, foul-smelling shores, cluttered with run-down walls and hovels that flooded with every high tide, there is now a grand, sweeping curve of granite. This is the Victoria Embankment, and it is Bozilettich's final masterpiece. As part of the construction of the low-level sewer, which had to run right along the river's edge, Bozilettich had a brilliant idea. Instead of just burying the sewer pipe and restoring the messy old riverbank, why not build a massive new retaining wall in the river itself, fill in the land behind it, and create a whole new piece of London? It was a breathtakingly audacious plan. He was not just cleaning the river, he was taming it, reshaping its very geography. The construction of the embankments, the Victoria on the north, the Albert on the south, and the Chelsea further upstream, was an engineering feat almost as impressive as the sewers themselves. Great iron caissons were sunk into the riverbed. Legions of navvies worked in the tidal mud to build the massive granite walls. And behind these walls, they poured millions of tons of earth, much of it the spoil from the sewer excavations themselves. In total, they reclaimed over 52 acres of land from the Thames. You can stroll along the wide, tree-lined promenade that now sits on top of this reclaimed land. It is one of the most beautiful urban spaces in the world. To your one side is the now cleaner River Thames, flowing within its new defined banks. On the other is a grand, new boulevard, lit by elegant, ornate gas lamps in the shape of dolphins. Within the embankment wall itself, Buzzelettage cleverly incorporated not just his Lodal sewer, but also a new underground railway line, the District Line, which still runs there today under large tunnel for utilities like water and gas pipes. It was a masterpiece of integrated urban planning, decades ahead of its time. Historians often debate Buzzelettage's ultimate legacy. Was he a sanitarian, an engineer, an urban planner? The truth is, he was all three. The sewers were his hidden legacy, the invisible system that gave London its health. But the embankments were his visible legacy, the beautiful public space that gave London a new, elegant heart. He had taken the city's greatest shame, its filthy riverfront, and transformed it into its greatest pride. There's a lovely, if possibly apocryphal, story about him. As an old man, he was being shown the new electrical subway system, a true marvel of the coming age. After the tour, his host asked the great engineer what he thought of this new wonder. Buzzelettage is said to have replied, "Well, it's all very clever, but we did it all with bricks and shovels." It's a quote that perfectly captures his quiet pride in the brute force, physical achievement of his generation. You can find a small monument to him on the Victoria Embankment, near the Hungerford Bridge. It's a modest affair, a bust of his head set into a grand granite wall. His name is written below and a simple, powerful inscription, Flumini vin cula posuit, which is Latin for he put chains on the river. It's a fitting epitaph for the man who faced down a monster, cleaned up a city, and built London's future, both the beautiful parts you can see, and the vital parts you can see. And so we end our journey where we began, but in a completely different world. You are standing on a bridge in modern London. The year is today, the sun is setting, casting a warm, golden light over the city. The skyline is a forest of glass and steel, unimaginable to the Victorians. The air is filled with the hum of traffic, the distant siren, the murmur of a dozen different languages from the tourists walking past you. You look down at the River Thames. It is cleaner now than it has been for centuries. Tour boats crisscross its surface, their decks filled with people taking photographs. Kayakers paddle near the banks. The river is once again a place of recreation, a source of pleasure. The Great Stink is a ghost, a half-forgotten story from a distant, dirtier past. But beneath your feet, deep in the London clay, Buzzelettage's legacy is still working. The Great Northern Outfall Sewer is still carrying the city's waste eastward. The Cross-Ness pumping station, though no longer powered by steam, is still a vital part of the system, its great iron engines now preserved as a magnificent museum piece. The elegant, egg-shaped tunnels are still performing their self-cleaning magic, day after day, night after cleaning magic, day after day, night after night. A city of horses and gas lamps is now, with some modern upgrades, serving a metropolis of nearly 9 million, a city of fiber optics and smartphones. It is a staggering achievement of engineering foresight. And here's a final, curious thought to leave you with. For over a century, Londoners believed their problem was solved forever. But the city never stopped growing. In recent years, the sheer volume of waste and, crucially, of rainwater running off the city's paved surfaces has begun to overwhelm even Buzzelettage's doubled-in-size system. During heavy storms, the sewers can still overflow, spilling a mixture of rainwater and raw sewage directly into the Thames, just as they did in the old days. The ghost of the Great Stink has not been entirely banished. Because of this, London is currently in the final stages of building a new, even bigger sewer, the Thames Tideway Tunnel, a colossal super sewer running even deeper beneath the riverbed, designed to intercept these storm overflows. It is, in essence, Buzzelettage's vision reborn for the 21st century. the project is a source of considerable debate among engineers and historians. Is it a fitting tribute to Buzz-Lightyear's legacy, a necessary next step? Or is it a sign that even the most brilliant foresight has its limits in the face of relentless urban growth? The arguments echo the debates of the 1852's concerns about cost, disruption, and the sheer scale of the undertaking. You lean against the cool stone of the bridge, feeling the gentle vibration of the city. You think of the layers of history beneath your feet. The modern street, and just below that, the Victorian one. Deeper still, the great brick arteries of Buzz-Lightyear's creation, the silent, hidden river that gives the city life. And deeper even than that, the brand new tunnels of the 21st century, a new generation's attempt to hold back the tide. The story of the Great Stink is not just a story about a smelly river. It's a story about a city learning a hard lesson, that you cannot simply flush your problems away and forget about them. It's a story about the invisible infrastructure that makes modern life possible, the hidden world of pipes and tunnels that we rely on every single day without a second thought. And it's a story about how a crisis, a moment of unbearable, foul-smelling, city-stopping horror, can sometimes be the necessary catalyst for a moment of genius, a moment that can shape the future for a century to come. The silent river still flows, a quiet and constant guardian, deep beneath the sleeping city. And so, our journey through the streets and sewers of Victorian London comes to a soft and quiet close. The great engines at Crossness have fallen silent in our story. The shouts of the navvies have faded into the past, and the mighty Thames now flows peacefully through the heart of a sleeping city, its secrets held deep within the earth. You can let the details of the story begin to soften now, like watercolor paints on a damp page, blurring at the edges, leaving only a gentle impression of history's quiet flow. There is nothing left to solve, no dates to remember. The work is done. The city is safe. You can feel a sense of that same relief, that first clean breath, settling into your own body now. The challenges of that time have been met, their echoes now just a gentle whisper in the narrative of the night. You can allow your own mind to become as calm and quiet as the river now is in our tale, its surface smooth and dark, reflecting the distant gentle light of the stars. Invisible system is doing its work, and you can do yours. You can rest. Our narrative has reached its peaceful end. It's okay if you're still here with me. Feel free to press play on another journey, or simply enjoy this deep and comfortable quiet that we have found together. For now, may your own dreams be clear and peaceful. Good night.